Give it a little bit here. There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to what I think is the third or fourth Modonaut Monday now. Today, you have me, Shane Griffith, hosting this one along with my buddy Rich Hurrey. Say hello.
What's up?
All right. Yeah, I'm broadcasting live from London. I've been in an airplane for the last 7 hours. Flew in just a little bit earlier today, so I'm a little sleepy and jet lagged. If you see me nodding off and yawning, it's not because of Rich; it's because of the jet lag. But we'll do the best with this as we can. So yeah, I wanted to bring Rich on board to do something a little bit different than what we had been doing with Ed up to this point. To offer something a little bit more unique, bring in some industry expertise to Modonaut Mondays and Modo Premium content with it that's available now through the community site. So hopefully we'll have Rich back again sometime next year as well. So we look forward to making this a bit more of a regular thing than just a one-off thing today. And then I'm also really super excited to say that next month on December 3rd, we'll have Tor Frick doing the next Modonaut Monday, helping us out as well. So lots of really, really good Modo power players, strong Modonauts coming on board to show us their skills. So Rich is going to take you through what rigging is to him, the art of rigging, why it's important, more than just the technicals of it. And he's going to kind of give you a little bit of an update on what's unique about Modo's order of operations. If you're not familiar with Rich, he's been working at Pixar for many, many years. He's recently left there and now working on his own, which will take you through what he's been up to lately. But Rich has worked on lots of pretty much every Pixar movie for a long time. Incredibles 2, doing the modeling and rigging for Dash. Cars 3, we're rigging on the fire truck. RV, Finding Dory, Mr. Ray, and Bubbles. I like Bubbles. The Good Dinosaur. Toy Story of Terror, which was made for TV series. Brave, Presto, Wall-E. The list just keeps going on and on here.
I'm old. That just means I'm old.
We're all kind of getting there. We were reminiscing on that a little bit earlier before the call, but yeah, you've kind of seen it and done it all when it comes to Pixar animation over the years, haven't you?
Well, I don't know if I'd say that, but
anyway, at least.
It was a fun ride. 13 years,
yeah.
And I learned a lot and went through a software transition, and it was a great time. I really enjoyed my time at Pixar, but now I'm an independent, as you mentioned. Anyway, it's cool to be here. It's fun to kind of get back into the real world a little bit. You know, when you're there. Working with proprietary software, you learn all kinds of interesting things, but you sort of sit outside the real world bubble. So it's been kind of fun to kind of see what's going on and everything else. So anyway, should I get started?
Yeah, go right into it. So for everybody else, I will be over in the chat trying to answer a few questions. I'll flag a few things to follow up with Rich on a little later on, but take it away, Rich. Show us.
Yeah. So Shane asked me to start off with kind of doing a basic understanding of the order of operations deformation system that Modo has. So I'm going to start there, and we're just going to talk about some real basic stuff, talk about how we can layer different deformation effects, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the art of rigging, because I feel really passionately about how right now it can be very difficult for people to get past the technical aspect of articulation, and rarely get enough time to spend on the artistic side, which is shapes in motion and making things look really good and appealing. So let's start off with order of operations. So I have just kind of a basic cylinder here, and I'm gonna create a couple of deformation effects, and I'm gonna do them kind of by hand to show you how the system works. So over here, we have new deformation item. You see we've got a different list here, and I'm gonna create something called an influence. So an influence, I say general influence, you'll see over here now under operators, this is actually what determines where a deformation effect happens in the stack. So the idea is that this will build a list of these things, and the order in which we add them and the order in which they're listed will make a difference. So let's do something first. Let's create, I'm going to call this scale. I'm going to name it this, and I'm going to drag it out into here. So now I have this influence. And the influence has 3 inputs. You've got the effector. That determines what the deformation effect is. A fall off, which we're not going to do right now. And the geometry is what is it actually affecting, right? So there's kind of 3 primary parts. What is it going to do? What is it going to do it to? And where and how will it be done, right? That's sort of the setup here. So let's create a, I'm just going to add a locator in here. And I'm going to call this scale effector. You notice that I'm just creating a regular locator, and I'm going to use this as the effector, which determines what the deformation effect will be. So I'm going to drag this guy into here, and realizing that this doesn't actually help me. So actually, I'm going to delete it. I need to actually add the channels themselves. So I'm going to go here. And so by selecting the scale effector, I'm going to add scale channels. And that's what these guys are here. We could talk about transformation items later. And I don't necessarily want to scale it all the way, all 3 axes. I want to scale along the Z, and I want to scale it on the X so it can get thinner. So I'm going to grab the X and the Z. I'm going to drag this over. Okay. So now what I've got is I've got this effector here. And you see they got these little dots here, right? These are the items. These are the outputs. This is a transformation item there. And this is the actual, I'm going to call it a pivot, but it's actually a locator. Pivot is Pixar nomenclature. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to drag this over. So now this effector is saying, I'm going to send my information over to this, this influence. Now, what do I want it to influence? I want it to influence this cylinder. So I'm going to output the cylinder into geometry. So now if I take this effector and I go to its channels here and I say adjusted scale, you'll see now I'm actually deforming the cylinder based off the X scale channel from this effector. So this effector is affecting this geometry, and this influence determines where. Now, in this case, there's only one, so we're not going to see much of a difference. So let's add a couple of effects and see how this works. All right. So let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and reset this value. So I'm just going to remove all edits. And because I'm crazy when it comes to display, I'm going to change the scale of this locator so it doesn't look so darn big. Oops, wrong one. Do this. All right. And I've already went and pre-created this control. If you click on it, you'll see that we've got these channels. I'm going to do a spin, a bend, and a scale. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up. It just makes it easier than trying to click on the item and then find its properties. This is one of the animation control interfaces that comes in Modo. I can show you how to do that really quickly. If you select the controls, if you add any user channels, you can see that I've added down here. And if you go to assembly, under this command here, if you click, you want to do item dot channel hall, and that will do this. When you click on it, it will pop up and show you any user channels that you have selected. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. All right, so I'm going to take the scale. I'm going to wire this into here, and I'm going to wire this into there. So now if I go here and I adjust the scale, you see that I am now adjusting the width and the length, or the width and the, was it length or height? Anyway, I'm making it into a thinner cylinder. All right, so there's one. So let's add our next one. So just like with our first influence, we need to add another one. So let's do a bend. So I'm going to create over here, add new deformation item. I'll add another general influence. Oops. Hello. Did it add it? No, doesn't look like it. Let's do it again. Add a new general influence. There we go. So now you can see we have this. Now this list, the order works from bottom to top. So it will scale and then it will bend, right, when we set this up. But let's go ahead and set the bend effector up to show that. But just so you know, this order here, this list really matters to what we're going to do. Now I'm going to add a new effector. And this one we do want to have a special thing. So I'm going to go here and add bend. You can see that now we've got this line here, which shows the length of the bend. And you'll see here in my list, I've got a bend effector. So I'm going to drag this into here. Got my bend effector. I'm going to grab my bend influence. I'm going to go here. And just like we did with the scale effector, I'm going to drag this over into effector. And I'm going to grab the output of the geometry, the cylinder, and I'm going to drop it in there. So now we have the effector, which determines what's going to happen, the influence, where it's going to happen, and then the cylinder, which is what is going to be affected. So now if I grab this bend here and I grab the angle, you'll see that now we have a bend. Okay. Normally I would ask if there are any questions, but I can't hear anybody, so I won't.
No questions yet. Just keep going.
Okay. So now I'm going to drag this length. What I want is I want the bend to be at the length of the cylinder. So for instance, if I do this now and then adjust the length, you'll notice that it affects how the bend works, right? Now we might want to, at some point, make a dynamic control to adjust the arc length of the bend, but in this case, I really just want it to be at the top. Now, one thing that Modo does that's important, check this out, is that we need to adjust this and say that this is its default position. We do that through the setup mode. If you go to setup, you'll see that this in this mode here, what we're saying is this is where I want all my deformations to start from. So this is how you can move an elbow and put it into the right place or set where the default position of something is going to be before it deforms. So you always want to make sure that you've set the setup value. By jumping into setup, you can see that now I've done that. All right, so now we have this bend effect. So let's take a look at this. I take my bend and let's go ahead and add the control together just so it's easier to use. So I'm going to go under my channels here. I'm going to hit angle. I'm going to drag this out. So now I've got my bend angle. And I'm going to go here under my controls. And I'm going to wire that into this. So now if I click on this, I'm going to get a bend, right? So it's much easier. But now what happens when I scale, right? Now, in this case, it's not going to look any different. And why is that? Because the scale is in the center of everything, right? So the scale happens first, and then the bend happens. If I change this order, now what happens when we scale? You get it, it's distorted. And why is that? And that's because just like a hierarchy, that's what is happening here. The bend is happening first, then the scale is happening. See how there's a difference there? So this order matters. Think about it step by step. Like if I'm going to rotate my finger, and then I'm going to rotate my hand, then I'm going to rotate my elbow, then rotate my shoulder. It's a hierarchy. So by taking the scale and happening first, what's happening is the scale happens, then the bend happens.
It's a stack, right? I mean, so the bottom of the stack is the first thing to.
That's right. It flows from the bottom up, just like a hierarchy does.
Yep.
Right. So now my bend, no matter what I do with the bend, is always going to affect based off where the scale is. And then the next one is a twist, which is it's basically the same idea. Is that if I want this thing to rotate, I got two options. I can rotate it from the base once it's bent, or beforehand, so it'll look like it's spinning through it. So we're going to do that by creating a rotation effector. So let's go ahead and set all this stuff up. I'm going to right click. I'm going to take the controls here, right click setup, and I'm going to say restore to setup rest. It's just going to set all my values back to their default state. And let's add another effector. So on the deform item effector, and I'm going to add a rotation effector. Now the rotation effector is slightly different. With the scale, I just created a locator and used it, right? And if you see, I took it from here and I wired it in. See how there's another connection here? This is a transformation item, okay? So if I select the scale, and that's what this is here, is a transformation item. The rotation effector is special in that what it does is it has its own kind of internal way of doing a rotation that doesn't run into that candy wrapper problem that you get with standard rotations or with a joint. So I'm going to call this rot effector. I'm going to drag this in here, and I'm going to rotate it along the Y, right? So I'm going to bring this into here. All right, and let's clean this up so it's a little easier to see. So now I've got a new effector, but instead of grabbing here, I'm going to want to grab to here. Now, what else do I need? I need another influence. So remember, effector describes what it's going to do, influence describes where, and the geometry input describes what. Let's go here and go to influence as a general influence, and I'm going to call this spin. influence, and bring this here. And I'm going to grab here. And then I'm going to grab here. And because I've already got it set up, I'm also going to do this. So now, if I grab this guy and I do spin, you see that I'm getting a rotation effect. Right? Now it's firing last. So if I go here, give me my controls, I do a bend and I do a spin, you can see that now it's rotating. It's more of a swing than a spin. Drag this down beforehand. Now when I do this, it's going to spin through the space. So at its basic level, that's how order of operations works. It allows you to build a custom effect. And I'm using something pretty simple, just a bend, a rotate, and a scale. But imagine trying to do this kind of effect with a joint-based system. It gets really, really difficult. And that's really, in my opinion, one of the best or most powerful things about this deformation system is that I can use non-joint based deformation effects and layer them into something that then could be moved by a skeleton after the fact or after. So before or after when a skeleton can be pushing something around. So
yeah, I think that's really key. To me, like you have a lot more flexibility with something like this to, change what, maybe you didn't pre-plan for that to spin around there, around the center axis of that curve like that. In other systems, you'd probably have to go back and almost completely re-rig it to get that effect. And you do a lot of similar stuff in other applications. I'm not saying you can't, but it's just exposed in a way that you have a lot more flexibility to move things around and to use things in different ways.
Right. Modo's deformation system allows for a much easier flexibility in this stuff. Absolutely, other systems can do these things. It's just harder. And I do think that there's a lot more about this deformation system that's special. Weight containers are one of my favorite things. We're not going to really talk about that too much today, but being able to separate your weighting from the mesh that you're trying to weight is extremely powerful, especially when you want to deal with rigs that are reused across multiple characters or multiple effects and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of a basic idea of order of operations. Were there any questions that came rolling through?
No, just a lot of love from the community right now. They're really digging it. Thumbs up all around.
Awesome. Okay.
This is a pretty simple rig. Show us something a bit more complex if you have something.
Well, I mean, I could load the tank up, but that's not a deformation rig. So the idea was, well, I mean, do you want to see the tank now, or do you want me to go right to the finger?
Go to the finger. Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to be able to talk about now is this is a very simple setup, and I've already done a lot of the basics so that we can get to this point. So one thing that you're going to want to do, and I think most people that get started in rigging kind of assume that there's this magic way that they're going to get a skeleton into a mesh, and it's just going to do what they want it to do. You're going to get the shapes that you want, and that's just never the case. So for instance, what I've done is I've created a very simple rotation effect. We're going to do something with just the tip of a finger, right? Because I want to talk about artistically when you're actually rigging for a final result, when you're rigging in characters in particular, what you're really doing is sculpting through space. You're sculpting over time in a way. You want I want my default shape for this finger to look right, but also when I rotate the tip here, there's a lot of shaping that needs to happen. So this is a pure rotation, but right, I mean, if we look at this from an artistic standpoint, this is not the shape that we want. It starts getting really noodly, right? What we want to be able to do, and how your real finger looks, and if everybody should be bending their finger now looking at it, right? You'll notice that you get a very sharp line across where the fingertip and that works. You don't have this bowing that you get there, right? So what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to combine a rotation with a shape correction. And correction is probably even the wrong word. What I want to do is I need to mimic what's happening in the real world, which when you rotate your finger, it's not just a rotation, it's a rotation and a translation. that happens in here, right? So how do we do this? So what I've done, if we're just gonna, it's a very simple thing, is that I've got my control here. I've created a rotation effector. I've created a relationship between the rotation, and I have a morph here. So this effector, right, is my rotation. This influence is my rotation. That's what we're seeing here. And then this is a morph. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine the linear morph with the rotation of the joint to get the shape that I want. All right. So the way it's set up is that at 90 degrees, it fires this there. So let's do this. I can click here and I can show you guys. It's a very simple thing here, right? So when this rotation effector is at 0, I want my morph to be 0. When the input or the rotation is 90 degrees, I want the value to be 1 or 100%. So let's set that up. Go here. I'll make this 90. And we're going to now we're going to manipulate the morph. So select the morph effector, then go to your vert mode, and I'm just going to start sculpting. Right? And what I want to do is I want to pull these guys down. I'm going to do real rough. One thing that you want to not be afraid of is making big shape changes when you're trying to create something. This is a modeling note as much as it is a rigging note, right? Is that I want to be able to I want to see big changes, and if you go too far, that's okay. If there was one thing that I got in trouble for at work, was that it took me a while to learn that I needed to make bigger choices shape-wise to start. It's better to go too far and pull it back than it is to go too little. But now we can see if I rotate this guy, and I got to come back out. And now you'll notice that as I pull this stuff down, right? I'm getting that now. Looks like there may be a problem with my morph setup. No, your morph. And hold on, guys. Looks like something might be acting a little weird. No, you're there. My morph is not attenuating. And let me make sure. All right, guys. So if I go here, that's attenuating there. I think I might have done something weird. So I'm going to bring you guys to this one here. Right, we're seeing the shape change that way. Let me make sure that I'm coming back to here. There we go. So something is up. I think that it was not actually affecting my morph, and I changed the model. So fun times with demos. So I'm going to undo some of this stuff. So the mistake I made here was that I didn't have my morph map selected, and I actually changed the default model. So we're going to go to this guy, and we'll just talk through it. Because demos are great, especially when they're live. So anyway, we'll talk about it, and then this will prove the point that I'm trying to prove, which is we want to think about the movement of these shapes in a way that's going to give us an appealing result on the back end. And we'll turn this on and off, right? So here's our default. We'll go back to this, right? So by doing this, we can see that this inflates here and how this is collapsing there. And then what I've done with the modeling, or with the morph, is I've created a more appealing final shape. Now it looks much more natural with this finger movement. And the real lesson here is that rigging is modeling, right? If I was to say, hey, I want you to create this finger in this position for a sculpt that you need to deliver to a client, you wouldn't deliver the finger like this. you would model it into the right shape, right? You'd make it look correct in that shape. So when you're articulating for, you know, a feature film or anything, you have to think about your rigging in modeling terms. When you hit a pose, whatever that pose is, you need to make sure that it looks appealing from a modeling point of view. And that's why rigging can be so difficult, is that you're dealing with thousands and thousands of poses in the same rig. They all have to work together. They have to play right together. I can't just make sure that this finger and this fingertip works right. I have to make sure it can make a fist. I have to make sure that it works with different hand poses, grabbing onto things and everything else. And, you know, the real, what's the right word for this? The understanding space is that it's not easy. It just isn't. It takes artistry. There's no magic solution. There are plenty of tools out there to make life better, make it easier to get to it from zero to something that isn't zero. But to really get an artistic shape thing that is going to be appealing, that's going to hold up on film, hold up on screen through all the motions, takes a lot of work. And anybody that's done any rigging gets that. I think that some people see rigging as a means to an end, but I see it as an artistic endeavor. I see it as, you know, rigging through space or modeling through space. So anyway, that went a little faster than I thought. We're at a half hour. But are there any questions that ran through?
Oh, there's just one. I think you kind of answered it though, about if you could apply an effector to influence a vert or vertex selection.
Oh yeah, well that's
essentially what you just did, I think.
Yeah, well, since if there's no questions about this, you know, I will say real quick, and then what I'll do is we'll do a little weighting one. I'll fire up something new, and we'll add some weights and add another effector so people can see.
Yeah.
Is that my intention now that I'm a free spirit, so to speak, is I'm going to be working on a new rigging master course. RMC3 is what I'm calling it right now. And I intend to take it from the tips of your nose to the ends of your toes. I'm going to literally build an entire character rig from top to bottom. I'm going to teach, just like I've done here, all the different artistic ideas as well as the technical ideas involved in doing that. The goal will be that if somebody takes the class, the course, or whatever we're going to call it at the end of the day, you can either be a master rigger, like you can start at the beginning and build all these rigs up from scratch, or you can take the rigs that I build that'll be included in it and just learn how to fit them and focus on the artistic aspect of rigging. So you're going to have the choice to do both. So this is I find myself in a unique position where I've got all this experience that I can give back, and I really want to do that. And if it works, then I can keep doing that. If not, then I will go get a studio job and be rigging again. So that is my intention, is over the next few months, is to build this out and have a chance.
You're going to actually do a rigging course that covers character rigging?
Yes, I know it's a little weird that the last two of the course didn't have characters, but in light of my day job, I felt a little like I needed to be a little more careful with the stuff that I could cover. But now, as an independent, I'm going to teach everything that I'm allowed to. At the end of the day, I want there to be a body of rigs that people can use to create characters. And I really want to take everything that I've learned and create a feature film class rig for Modo. That is my goal over the next, let's say 6 months, so that I have time to get it done. But that's my goal. So, okay.
I got a bit of a just a personal question for you from my side. When you approach, I would say just approach a leg rig, for example. How do you approach that mentally? Like, do you draft it out, thumbnail it, like block out where you think things are going to be kind of wired together, how you would wire it together, or do you just kind of start assembling it directly in Modo and kind of rewire and readjust as you go along? What's your kind of approach from the ground up?
My workflow is always to prototype loose and fast. So go throw a bunch of crap in here. Don't worry about naming. What am I trying to accomplish? And it's always a bunch of pieces. It's layered, right? You know, in this case, I would, you know, all right, I got rotation effectors. I know that I want, you know, morph corrections. I would throw them all in there, make sure that I've got that working right. And think, okay, now I want to simulate some skin sliding. How would I do that? Is that adding a translation that I weight on top of this and then wire it in? Basically figure out all the pieces without worrying about how it's all going to play with other parts of the rig, right? Or how it's all going to play together at all. What are the chunks of effect that I want to do? I want skin sliding. I want, you know, volume preservation. You know, let's say if it's a leg, you know, do I want the calf to affect? Do I want to be able to have a muscle bulge or slide? So I'm like, how would I accomplish that effect? And so you can't see it because I don't have a camera, but I've got my little pad and paper. I'm always sketching out stuff and I'm trying it. Then once I've figured out what will and won't work, I re-rig it with the technical aspect in mind. So it's like, all right, I've solved the artistic final solution. I know what I'm going to get. Then you break it all down. You make sure, are things named correctly? How's the rigging interface going to work? How is it going to play with the other leg rig? Am I going to be able to mirror it? You know, how will it work with the hip? Like there's all kinds of technical aspect. So prototype, then you build it for real, and then you can deploy it.
You go back and rebuild it, or is it just a constant iterative process?
I rebuild from scratch. This is my personal workflow. I will have a dirty file that is just there for me to figure crap out. And then what's nice about that is you save it so that when you start building the real rig, you can reference back to your dirty file. And maybe this is a new term, #dirty file. That I can use as a reference to go, why did that work? Oh crap, yeah, I forgot this. So I always have a library of these kind of working files set aside before I have the final piece that I'm going to deploy. And that is actually, you know, you actually bring that up in a way. I'm going to bring the idea of compartmentalized rigs to Modo too. And people do this. It's not just a Rich Hurrey thing. This is not an uncommon thing. But the idea is I'm going to have an arm rig, and I'm going to have a hand rig, and I'm going to have a finger rig, and I'm going to have a nose rig, and an ear rig, and a mouth rig, and a spine rig, and a shoulder rig. These will be separate elements that I then layer in together to create this final effect.
Well, I think that's pretty common in production. At least I've seen
it is
places, and
but
all good riggers kind of have their foot rig that they love. You know, they live and die for, and they reuse it over and over again.
That's right. That's right. All right, so let's do this because we're going to build from scratch. And somebody asked a question about weighting. So let's go ahead and turn this on. And
keep typing in your questions, guys, too. And we'll turn back to Rich. Sorry. You can tell I'm really jet lagged.
Rick
is not here today.
All right, so somebody had asked about just, you know, grabbing points. And just attaching a deformation effect. If you make a point selection, and we'll make sure that this works. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to add an operator, and I'm going to add an effector, and I should be able to create a transform effector. That should have wired this all the way up, right? And it did. So the idea is by selecting those points, it didn't add the weight. Well, it does add the effector there. I thought that was something that worked. That is me guessing. But if you select the prim and you go under your operator and add a transform, it'll automatically create your influence. It will make an effector, wire it in, and it will connect the mesh. Now, what I want, or what you wanted, was to select these points. So what you can do is select your prim, go into vertice mode, and so I just want to move the top of that. So now I want to take those points. So you could do it two ways. You could create a weight map by hand. So if you go into your list here, you can go under weight maps, you could create a new weight map, then you could do all that stuff. I'm a weight container guy. So I'm going to go to my thing here, and under deformers, here it says create weight container. When I create that, what it's done is it's created this separate element, right? This is now containing the weights that I've added. I added those points. You can see the red is 1 and the green is 0. And if I disconnect the sphere from the effector, or sorry, the influence, and I wire this into here. Now, when I move this, it's going to move just that, right? Now you say, all right, well, if I want to rotate this, you can see that it's swinging. If you wanted to center it, this is where I talked about before. You go to your setup mode. Now I'm going to say, where do I want the default position of this effector to be? And I want it to be here. You'll notice that as I'm moving it, nothing's deforming. That's because it's saying I need to find or determine my starting point. Now I come out of setup mode and I move this, right? So now it's looking at any of those transformation changes and says, okay, I know where my starting point is, and I want to apply the difference between my starting point and what you're actually doing to apply the deformation. So that's the way I would do it, because I like having these separate containers. What's nice about this is that if, let's say I want to scale this and I want it to be a different effector. So I'm going to create a new locator, and let's go into setup mode and move this locator, and I'm going to center it, or let's set it to the top here. All right. So now I've got this. That's its position. And I'm going to add a new influence. So let's add a new influence, general influence, and let's call this scale again. All right, I'm going to drag this down here. And I'm going to grab this guy, and I'm going to call it scale. And these suffixes and everything are just my own thing. You guys can name whatever you want. The only thing, naming things is more important than what you name it. Have a naming convention that you follow, because more often than not, people will have locator 57, locator 5777000, prim geom 0015, and name as you go. Even if it's crappy naming, give it some naming.
It's always easier to do it as you go too than to go back and redo it all.
Yeah. So now I've got this scale effector, and I can go through here and you go, huh, what's going on? Well, right now I wanted to work on just the same points, but you notice it didn't do anything because this scale influence, I don't have any weights. Well, it sure would be a bummer to have to rewire and readjust and do whatever. But if I just take my weight container and I go into here, now my scale is going to work with the same weighting. So what this means is that I have one place where all my weights live, and I can wire that into multiple deformers. I can't understate how incredibly powerful it is to separate the weighting from the shape. I know that sounds crazy because it's always being applied to the mesh, but being able to set this rig up to say, I don't want the sphere to be connected anymore. Okay. So I want to add something else. And if I go through here and let's say I add a cube, and I say I want to take these points on the cube, make sure I didn't grab the sphere, right? And I'm going to add it to the weight container. So let me go back to my deformers. I'm going to add points. Now I have a deformation effect already set up. Didn't have to add any new rigging. I didn't have to. That's weird. Where's the X? Oh, it's here. I can't see it because it's red. Right? This allowed me to reuse and see how the sphere is not connected because it's no longer, these points have been removed. Now, what's interesting, if we're going to go under the hood here quite a bit. If I select my sphere, you'll see that it actually still has the weight map in there. Like the weighting information is still sort of internally staved, but it's no longer connected through the weight container. So anyway, we're getting into advanced crap now. But the idea is I was able to build a rig, right? The scale effector, the transform effector, these two influences in a weight container that is portable. And I could drop that into any scene. And all I would need to do is add the weights to the weight container and I'm done. It doesn't matter what prims there are. There could be 100 spheres. There could be 100 cubes. I add the weights, boom, my rig is done. So this idea of abstracted weights in your rig is super, super powerful. It's one of my favorite parts about Modo. And I have many, Shane. I have many things. But anyway, that's
we all do. Right? We got a few questions. Let's see here. So Greg Leuenberger was saying that back when you were, I think, setting this up initially, he said, "Oh, scroll past my screen here. You can do all this from the, you can do it from the left-hand setup menu, and it's one click. The transform deformer button after selecting the points, essentially."
Yeah, that worked before, and maybe I did something different. I have to be honest with everybody here. I'm a Modo 901 expert, and 12 is like, because at Pixar I was modeling in Modo. I wasn't rigging in Modo, so I just sort of went with the flow with how we had upgraded where we were, and I just kind of stayed there. And I dabbled in the new versions of Modo, but I didn't play with it enough. So now I've got a lot of homework. I'm getting in, and like things have changed. A lot of stuff I love. There's so much new cool crap in it.
There's a lot changed this year alone too, especially this area.
With me. I have to sort of get back up to speed. And honestly, I haven't played with the mesh operators very much. It's all integrated now, and I intend to break it hard. I'm gonna go in there. I've got some really crazy ideas of stuff that I want to do. So yeah, I gotta get back into stuff. So anyway, I'm really excited to be back in this. And you know, last time when I did the last rigging master course, it was with a day job. It took months and months and months, and nights and weekends and stuff. I even took a month off for the last one, you know. Now I'm going to get to focus.
Well, it's like 200 some hours of videos. It's
a lot.
Crazy.
It was 60 hours, but it clears, right?
But the way you talk, it's like 200 hours of video.
Oh yes, I certainly.
There was some questions though about RMC2 and its relevancy to the latest versions. I personally think it's really relevant. I mean, you know, you cover a lot of the foundational stuff, much like what we briefly covered here today. It really looks at just rigging in a general sense inside of Modo. We were kind of kidding about it before, but in the RMC2 and RMC1, it's not about character rigging. It's just about mechanical assemblies and rigging things together to drive other actions. And it really shows a lot of power.
I will say this: I'm going to refactor. I'm going to go through everything that's in the current rigging master course, and I'm going to update anything that needs to be updated with the new version of Modo. But I guess that 80 to 90% will require nothing more than a, hey, this button is over here now. Or it looks like this now, but the effect is the same because, and I bring the tank up, well, obviously because I love tanks, but this was rigged in Modo 4, right? This still works. I didn't change anything about this rig. To give you an idea of how relevant everything is that, you know, for the most part, stuff has stayed really, really stable with these systems. And you guys have done a really amazing job of backwards compatible stuff. So, you know, this thing was rigged with, when you talked about, did I sketch it out? This thing was literally pieces and paper. There was no schematic view when I built this thing, right? So it was connecting attribute to attribute to attribute through the connection editor, right? So actually, I don't even remember what it was called. It wasn't called the connection editor. I forget the name of the dang thing. But the point is, everything, all the concepts and all the ideas in the current rigging master course are valid. There's some difference to Modo. It's just a matter of a UI change, but functionality wise, I think everything works exactly the same. I don't think there's anything that would not work or does not work. What doesn't work is the QuickTime nature of the videos and the browser. That I intend to fix. So the new version will the way to consume it will be modernized. So. Trying to give you a second to talk, so I'm not just babbling the whole time.
Oh yeah, I'm just pausing to scan some questions here real quick, see if there's anything else. Feel free to type in any other questions that you have out there.
I'd love to answer anything. And
notice that you're playing around a little bit with the beta these days. Anything cool in 12.2 that you really liked or seen so far?
You know, honestly, I've been bringing up a bunch of my old rigs and playing with things and just kind of seeing the difference of things. It's interesting. This bar up here for me is new, being able to just kind of switch between the different pieces. So I think,
We've moved a few things around on you.
right? Well, item mode went away. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, now I understand that. So some of it's just getting my head wrapped back around with some of the changes. I know that you guys have done a bunch of stuff with the schematic as far as being able to make these things cleaner and easier to manipulate. I mean, you bring up Ballman schematic view. I can load that up if we want. It's where are we? This schematic is insane, right?
Yeah,
So
that's pretty insane.
right. So this is I'm looking forward to taking advantage of all of the new schematic view stuff so that I don't have to like wire things out quite like this. So yes, well, this is like I did this before there was workspaces, so I couldn't. There weren't even multiple workspaces that you could save and embed in the file. So to give you an idea of the old school nature of things that I've done, but anyway, I'm more than anything, I'm just excited to get back in, and I'm looking forward to giving back and teaching. There's so much out there, and I just feel like from an articulation
even you impressed Mario with that schematic. And he's the master of schematics these days.
Well, imagine you're like, all right, I need to keep everything lined out.
Yeah. I don't know. There's no way I'd be able to go back to something like this years later. It would take me weeks to just re-engineer it in my head again. But yeah, I mean, that's some of the benefits of what we've added in 12.2 with the comment nodes and backdrop items and stuff like that. Be able to group this stuff just more visually as well.
Yep. I'm excited. I mean, this is basically a mouth rig. To give you an idea of the kind of complication and sophistication that these rigs need to have for the kind of control animators expect, this is just a mouth rig. Just a mouth. Not the rest of the face, not the neck, the body, the head, nothing. So, you know, this is so that, you know, we can, you know, pull up and adjust things and, you know, and have the kind of control that, you know, that animators expect to have. So you may wish I didn't come back.
I'm sure I'll be hearing a lot from you in the next few months.
Oh, you will. But this is the thing, and
that's okay though.
It's great. I'm excited. I really, really am. I want to take things to the next level. I want, you know, I have a big space in my heart for Modo and what it's done for my career and how it's helped me get where I need to be. And I want to give back through it, and I want to give back to it. You know, the tank was something like that. You know, it was the first time when Mark started building all of the, you know, that system before the deformation system was really a thing. And it's like, all right, we're going to push this thing as far as we possibly can so that people don't run into any roadblocks. They don't run into, you know, the system stopping them from working. And I think that, you know, I didn't have a chance to really do that with the deformation system as much because I was so busy at work.
Well, yeah, I think you just you know, you get stuck in the mode where you got to constantly produce. So it's easy to you know, stick in the areas that you know, stick with the releases that you know, and it's hard to in a large production facility like Pixar, it's hard to maintain actually that bleeding edge, if you will, over long periods of time. You know, they do the right things. They allow, you know, there's gaps, there's downtime where you are allowed to explore and learn new things. But you're often, you know, kind of burn out at that point too. So it's hard to you know, get back into that creative mode and really advance your skills. I've seen it many great artists over the years. They just kind of they tend to stall out at times because of that. So
yeah,
good in many ways. You know, I'm really excited to see you have this opportunity and this break and see what, you know, cool things you're going to do with Modo these days and we're back in there on the schematic side, the animation side, with actions and actors now in the 12.1 release. So we're doing quite a bit of stuff as we continue onward, even into the 13 series now as we wrap up 12.2 these days. So it's starting to, we're coming back around to animation. So it's good timing for us.
The universe is, the timing is right.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I remember when I was, leaving Pixar, and I should say that, it wasn't my choice to leave Pixar. But I left on really good terms, and it wasn't because I wasn't doing a good job. It was just the budget realities of where things were. I also raised my hand and said, hey, if we've got to lose some people, go ahead and take me, because I'm after 13 years, it was like, there are other things that I want to do. So this being able to come in now and kind of download all that experience in a way that could be helpful is exciting to me. And doing that now's this window of opportunity, for me, where if I, waited another 4 or 5 months and I'm like, okay, well, I don't have this unlimited pile of money in my bank account, unfortunately. So I gotta get a job, but I've got a good 6 to 7 months where I can focus and do something, and I want to give back through that with that time. So it'll be awesome. I'm excited.
One quick question, and then we'll call it a wrap here. There was one question that came in about how applicable, your knowledge and your training would be to other tools that are out there.
100%.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of similarities to what you can rig across tools. The order operations thing is pretty unique to Modo, though.
It is, but you know what isn't 100% unique to Modo is this idea of shape through space, right?
Yeah. Well, the art of rigging, if you will, it really is an art. I like the other phrase that you had there, where rigging is modeling as well, and that's very true. Any high-end rigging in any application, that's very true.
Right. I mean, in the first couple of RMCs, it's how to think through the problems. And I'm using Modo as a canvas because that's where my heart is, right? But I could do the same thing in Maya. I could do the same thing. There are some unique things about this deformation system that are very hard for me not to have. The independent weight nature, the order of operations allows for a more creative expression through some of these rigging problems. So I will say that. But generally speaking, the art of rigging is sort of like the art of painting or the art of sculpting. Are you using clay? Are you using Modo sculpt tools? Are you ZBrushing? It's so 100% is probably an incorrect statement, but at least 90. And when I start getting into the art of rigging, now that I can actually rig a character, all that information is going to carry over to any place you need to do this kind of work, for sure. And anybody that's had the original stuff.
What you're doing is taking all of those life lessons learned in Presto, which is Pixar's own animation system,
right?
Applying that to Modo. So rigging is an art. It's not necessarily a tool or a brush. It's an art form.
Yep. And I want that reality to be more accessible to people. And the hard part is the brush, if we're going to use the painting analogy, is so complicated. And it has to be because it's doing really technical stuff under the hood. Yeah. So most people get locked up in just, I can't figure out how to make a leg rig. So I can't make leg rig work. So I'm going to use something automatic to just get something moving. Versus if they had something they could drag in and then they could spend that time working on the art, the shapes and shapes in motion, you're going to end up with a much better result. And it's almost like there's a whole nother room that people aren't even walking into. They don't even know because they've been fighting getting through the one they're in right now. So, and I want to open that door for people. Yep. And I'm not the only one. There's a lot of great rigging TDs out there. I hope nobody thinks that I'm saying I'm the bee's knees. I'm not. I was surrounded by some of the best rigging talent in the world. These guys made me feel inadequate every damn day. so I wanna give back how I can, but I'm certainly not the top of the mountain, that's for sure.
Well, we really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time today coming on Modonaut Monday with us. I love just sitting there and drooling over what you're doing. It's cool to watch a master work, regardless of, if you're building Buzz Lightyear live in front of us, or if you're just modeling a finger. I think it's still pretty cool to pick up on all the little subtle things that you were doing there. I caught quite a few little tips and tricks as you're going without even you describing them. So great stuff. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll get you back next year again at some point.
That'd be great. That'd be great. And I want to definitely share my progress on RMC3 as I get stuff done. So
yep. And hope to see you up in the forums here again.
Yes, I promise. I promise to be more active.
Actually, Slack. You're very active on Slack, I've noticed.
Yes, I am.
Yep. So with that, we'll end today's broadcast. It is recorded and will be reposted on the community site. If you pull down your little, where you click on your icon, you should see Modo Premium content, and that's where you'll find all of the recordings from Modonaut Monday, plus the vast majority of the paid training that we have available on the website. It's also there for free if you're an active Modo maintenance customer or subscription customer. So hopefully everybody enjoyed this today. And next month we'll have Tor Frick for the 3rd of December. Take care.
See ya.